Νομίζω η τέχνη αποδεικνύει για μία ακόμη φορά πώς καταπιάνεται με τα ζητήματα που ξεπερνάνε τις εποχές και συνδέουν τις εποχές. Και επίσης νομίζω ότι το θέμα που θα συζητήσουμε τώρα, στο επόμενο πάνελ, το οποίο έχω και τη χαρά και την τιμή να συντονίσω, είναι ένα θέμα που μπορεί να είναι πάρα πολύ επίκαιρο, αλλά θα μας συνοδεύει για πολύ καιρό ακόμα και θα μας συνδέσει και με παλιότερες εποχές κρίσης και με μελλοντικές εποχές κρίσης και του πώς αυτές οι κρίσεις επιδρούν στην ζωή των γυναικών. Θα ξεκινήσουμε με μία σύντομη συνέντευξη που μαγνητοσκοπήσαμε πριν από λίγες μέρες με την Αντικυβερνήτρια της Πολιτείας της Καλιφόρνια, την κυρία Ελένη Κουναλάκη, η οποία και πάλι λόγω διαφοράς ώρας δεν μπορούσε να είναι σήμερα μαζί μας ζωντανά. Και θα συνεχίσουμε τη συζήτηση με ένα πάνελ με 3 εκλεκτές ομιλήτριες, τις οποίες θα σας συστήσω πολύ σύντομα. Να δούμε το βίντεο με την κυρία Κουναλάκη, γιατί θα ήθελα να συζητήσουμε και με τις ομιλήτριές μας στη συνέχεια και πάνω σε αυτά που θα αναφέρουμε με την κυρία Κουναλάκη.
So, good morning, Governor. We are really happy to be able to talk with you today, even though we were not lucky enough to have you in person with us here in Athens. How are you?
Well, Stella, it's wonderful to be with you. And I think that if I were in Greece right now, I would be the lucky one. But it's great to be able to do this virtually.
Yes, it is. Thanks for technology here. So I would like to thank you for your time, and I would like to go straight into the topic of our discussion today, which is, as you know, the impact that the COVID-19 pandemic has had on women, not just in Greece, but everywhere. So let's start with the US, and you work in California, you're an elected official in that state. So how has the pandemic affected women in California and then in the rest of the US?
Well, Stella, first let me just say I see the program for today, honoring women throughout history in Greece, is really just fantastic. Some of my great heroes from the past and the present are Greek, certainly Laskarina Bouboulina. But even I noted that the Konstantinopoulos family is supporting this event. I happen to know Carmen Konstantinopoulos, and she is just one of the most extraordinary women who I've had the privilege of knowing and seeing her incredible brand of effectiveness. So it's really an honor to be here to celebrate the bicentennial anniversary of Greek liberation.
And we're so grateful for their support.
So to answer the question, the pandemic has been very, very difficult for women in California. I think women across the country, women around the world. Here in California, starting with our frontline workers and our essential workers, we have about 80% of our healthcare workers are women. They tend to be disproportionately responsible for household duties. So in terms of being out on the front lines, women have been severely impacted. We have also seen that women have experienced the highest levels of unemployment. So as you know, California was one of the first or the first state in the country to issue a stay-at-home order. A lot of people went home. There were real questions of how families were going to be able to pay their bills. And women, of course, are so often responsible for childcare duties. And with schools closing, it really, the impact was very, very severe.
I can imagine. And you mentioned that the order, the stay-at-home order, and I was wondering, what is your opinion, the role of the government has to play in helping counter this negative impact for women in the West? So what would your policy suggestions be for the government to try and counter this impact?
Well, Stella, at the state level, we've had quite a surprising and welcome level of economic recovery. So we had a significant budget surplus this year. In fact, the largest surplus in the state's history, about $75 billion. Along with that, we had another $25 billion that came from the federal stimulus. So these funds have been a very powerful tool in helping recover and reclaim so much that was lost during the first, the most severe part of the pandemic. And helping women and children has certainly been part of that. So without question, some of the social benefits that we've been able to provide, expanding unemployment insurance, paying 100% of unpaid rent, stopping housing evictions. These things help women disproportionately. But there were some very innovative and new things that we were able to do with this powerful budget that really for many, many years people had recommended and advocated for, but we never had the financial ability to do it. And starting with school lunches. So California is a huge state. We're 40 million people. Just our Los Angeles school district alone is the largest school district in the country. And about 80% of the students in the Los Angeles Unified School District lived at or below the poverty line. So providing school lunches to all children in California public schools has been an enormous expansion in our social safety net, which is quite notable. The other exciting thing that we have done with this budget is the expansion of childcare and education to include what we call a transitional year of kindergarten. So the year before, most children will make their way into kindergarten at the age of 4. I know in Europe, you think it's quite remarkable, and we do too in California, that we can't do more to provide early education to our students. But a brand new year of transitional kindergarten for California's kids will have a transformational effect on their lives, but also on the lives of their parents, and especially their mothers, who are going to be able to send their children to transitional kindergarten, early education programs a year early.
So the transitional year starts at age 3 now?
That's right. But again, it sort of depends, but essentially a year early, which for many students, many kids will be age 3.
Okay. And I'm curious, what place would you say paid leave has to have in this set of measures and, provisions for parents and families?
Oh, there's no question that we still have a long way to go. And we do have some programming to expand paid leave. But look, as we noted, women do tend to carry the largest burden of the family duties. That is still true. And so being able to accommodate more moms in order to be able to make it feasible to raise your kids and work, which for most women, as we know, is not a choice. It's something that they have to do. It's good for our moms, it's good for the dads, it's good for the kids, it's good for society. And frankly, it's also good for the California economy, which is the 5th largest economy in the world.
It's so important what you say. So now that we are in a position to say that we are going to start building back. So what does building back better mean to you in terms of inclusion, the inclusion of women and of other underrepresented groups? So what does that mean for you?
So Stella, when you say build back better, I think of our President Joe Biden and our Vice President Kamala Harris, our Speaker of the House, Nancy Pelosi, who's a mentor of mine and a great Californian, perhaps the greatest Californian. But Build Back Better is, of course, the program that the Biden-Harris administration is pursuing. And it absolutely includes programs that will lift women up and help support women and get closer to an equitable approach of using the power of our economy to support women and what matters to them, what's important for them. So a couple of really, again, very notable and exciting things. Certainly, we've had several $1 trillion now allocated for stimulus in our state. One of the programs that I would say is the most exciting is the expansion of the child tax credit. So with this policy and this budget item, Speaker Pelosi and the Biden-Harris administration have expanded the child tax credit to 23 million children in our country, helping to lift them out of poverty. It is the largest expansion in modern history, certainly in this century, in what we've been able to do to help support children. So this is going to have to be renewed as early as next year, but it has been very exciting and well received, and those checks have already gone out to those families who qualify. But again, there are so many other elements of this budget when you're talking about a level of stimulus like we're talking about, and the fact that the transportation bill that's being negotiated right now, these good paying jobs for Americans, they impact families. They go directly into the pocketbook of our working families in this state and help put food on the table. And not to get too partisan here with you, but the Trump administration priority was to use the power of the budget to give tax cuts, and of course a lot of that was unpaid, to big corporations. Whereas what the Biden-Harris administration with Nancy Pelosi are doing is using the power of our economy to take some of the, to rebuild economic security for our families. And, there's a lot of research that has been done, starting with the World Economic Forum, that has really collected data to see that in any country, not just in the United States, in any country, if you look at how women are doing, you will see that that is the best indicator of how a country is doing in terms of its GDP. So this is established data-driven fact. And so the policies of the Build Back Better platform are absolutely targeted at helping lift up women.
That's so important. So important what you say. So if I can get a bit personal on my last question. So what about you? What was the greatest challenge that you faced over the last 1 year and a half, over the last 18 months, in your personal or professional or family life?
Well, it's been obviously a very, very difficult year, but my family came from Greece. My father immigrated after the Second World War. My husband, both of his parents were refugees. And so being in public service is really a privilege. My grandmother, my yaya in Tripoli, outside of Tripoli, never went to school, never learned to read. And she believed in the promise of America that she let my father come here alone to work as a farm worker. She could never have imagined that her granddaughter would become the first woman ever elected lieutenant governor of the beautiful state of California. She could never even have dreamed of such a thing. So when I approach the work of this state, especially during crises, I really think about the incredible privilege and what the California dream has meant to my family, and the fact that millions of California families are on that same pathway. But during this time, there have been many challenges. It has been very hard to see that not only did the pandemic impact women disproportionately, but it impacted people of color disproportionately. We saw the fatalities skewed toward our Black and Brown communities in terms of the number of people who were stricken with COVID, who contracted it, and who died from it. Very, very painful to see. And then I will also tell you, as a mom myself, seeing children sent home from school, sports canceled. There was one time that I actually cried. And that was when a few months in, by the summer of 2020, I realized that schools would not open in September. Public schools would not open. And I actually, it affected me very profoundly, just thinking of all those parents, all those moms and dads, all those kids, everything that they were grappling with. And now they weren't going to be able to be at school. Of course, we had a robust transition to online learning, and the families and the teachers just did incredible work in rising to the occasion. By the way, we put billions of dollars into our budget to expand broadband internet access, realizing that online learning is going to be an essential part of the future, even though, of course, we know we want to bring our students back into the classroom, and by and large we have. But that was probably the most difficult thing to see. And I have two sons. They missed all the festivities of graduating from high school and transitioning into college, but now they're in college and they're in the in-person learning in California colleges. So seeing them thriving and really appreciating the opportunities that they have now that they've been able to go back to school, that gives me a lot of hope that other families are experiencing the same thing.
I must say I cried a lot all the while the schools were closed here in Greece. So I totally get what you say. So thank you so much for being here with us today. I hope we'll get to have you here in Athens with us at some point in the future. And I wish you all the best in your work and your life.
Well, Stella, thank you for the incredibly important work that you're doing, what this conference means to people, celebrating. You know, Greek women, in my experience, have always been among the strongest. You know, I mentioned my grandmother. She never learned to read, but she was a force in her χωριό, in our family, really very much a decision maker, and someone who was in their village instrumental in lifting up other families as well. So I'm very proud, as you might have noticed, to be a Greek woman. By the way, the goddess Athena is on our state seal, another source of pride. Every day when I walk into my office, I see her with her helmet and her spear and her owl of wisdom. So thank you for what you're doing to lift Greek women up and ensuring that they are, more than anything, in my opinion, given credit and acknowledgement and seen for the leaders who they are.
Thank you so much.
Ήμουν πάρα πολύ συναχωμένη και ήταν και νύχτα εξού ο χάλια φωτισμός. Συγγνώμη. Πάνω σε αυτά που ανέφερε η Αντικυβερνήτρια της Καλιφόρνια, που είδατε ότι μίλησε και πολύ συγκεκριμένα για τα μέτρα που έλαβε η Πολιτεία και είναι κάτι που θα ήθελα να συζητήσουμε με το πάνελ, θέλω να καλέσω στο πάνελ την κυρία Αντιγόνη Λυμπεράκη, Καθηγήτρια Οικονομικών και Διευθύντρια του SolidarityNow, την Marta Breen, η οποία είναι συγγραφέας και δημοσιογράφος, έχει γράψει το βιβλίο «Γυναίκες στη μάχη». Η Marta μας έρχεται από την Νορβηγία και είμαστε πάρα πολύ χαρούμενες που την έχουμε μαζί μας εδώ. Welcome, Marta. Και την Dr. Ζέφη Δημαδάμα, την οποία δεν θα την δούμε στη σκηνή, θα τη δούμε online. Η κυρία Δημαδάμα είναι διδάσκουσα στο Τμήμα Διεθνών, Ευρωπαϊκών και Περιφερειακών Σπουδών στο Πάντιο Πανεπιστήμιο και είναι και αντιπρόεδρος γυναικών του Ευρωπαϊκού Σοσιαλιστικού Κόμματος. Καλώς ήρθατε και οι τρεις. Αυτό το πάνελ θα γίνει στα αγγλικά, έτσι ώστε να είμαστε όλοι στην ίδια σελίδα και ελπίζω να έχετε διερμηνία όσο και όσο τη χρειάζεστε. Great to have you here with us. I hope Mrs. Dimadaama will be able to join us as well. Okay. Hello, Mrs. Dimadaama.
Oh, thank you for the invitation. I'm really sorry that I cannot join you there, but I'm here and I'm very, very happy that we can discuss very interesting things. I heard already Ms. Κουναλάκη, and it was a great contribution of her.
Thank you. Technology is on our side. I would like to start with you, Ms. Lυμπεράκη, if I may. And I would like for you to paint us a picture from your experience as a civil society leader, as an activist and an academic in the field of the economic development of women. What has been the impact of this pandemic for women in Greece?
Right. Thank you very much for the invitation and heartfelt congrats for the whole business of today and tomorrow. Let me start by saying that the pandemic is a major blow to humanity, to all humanity, regardless of gender, location, continent, and whatever, class and group and stuff. We know, however, that crises rarely have, if any, if there is a, I don't think there is a historic precedent. The crises tend to be very gender specific in their impacts. I can't think of a crisis that was really gender neutral. Now, from this pandemic crisis, it appears that when looking at Greece, but also in Europe, but also in the whole world, women had a very hard time. They had been affected negatively and disproportionately. In this sense, this crisis is different from the previous one, the economic recession, because this time sectors and jobs that were previously shielded by the recession got the biggest hit. And it is exactly the sectors and the jobs held mainly by women. And this is one thing that we have to remember. The second thing is that apart from unemployment, the hours of work have declined mostly in women, in female employing sectors. So there is a difficulty there too. At the same time, the available data between the end of 2019 and the third quarter of 2020 show that new hires were primarily for men, interestingly. And needless to say that when you have to deal with teleworking and remote work, it is much easier for a man, an executive, to conduct his business from his home in the suburbs and using Zoom and doing perfectly well, whereas the nurse or the cleaner have to stay put, plus they have to use public transport, which is an issue in itself. So without mentioning the increase in gender-based violence, mainly domestic violence addressing women and children and girls, which I think is going to be the topic of Zéphi, I need to say that this pandemic created an extra burden, and it exposed lots of deficits in terms of the time use, the time needed to care for people, children and elderly people too. And in that sense, this is the job that silently, but very rarely, it is women that perform. So in that, when looking further to the big picture of the less developed countries, it can be easily argued that the less prosperous a country, the more difficult it is to mobilize institutions and behaviors that shield vulnerable individuals from the pandemic. Peru is the best example that took initiatives immediately after the pandemic, very swiftly, but had the most deadly results of the pandemic because there was no other means of payment apart from paper cash, and paper cash in markets was women's job mainly. So
I would like to get back to that later about what differentiates a society that deals with these problems effectively and from those who do not. I would like to go to Zéphi and ask her specifically about the impact of the pandemic on gender-based violence. And I don't know, Zéphi, if you have data about Greece and also Europe as in general.
Yes, thank you, dear Stella. So, yes, this issue is a not easy one. Unfortunately, the lockdowns contain the coronavirus spikes in domestic violence. So we have 1 in 3 women worldwide experience physically or sexual violence, mostly by an immediate partner. In Europe, we have at the beginning of the pandemic, and when we have again the issues of the quarantine, that they have to stay home, and we believe that our home is a safe one, but this is not true also for European Union. We have, let's check the number that 3 times more at the European Union countries calls in the hotlines. That means that at the beginning, when we started the pandemic, we start to have, unfortunately, this increasing of this violence against women and children, especially in France. For example, we saw 34% jump in a domestic violence report in just over a week. So I think that it's something that we need to focus on, and unfortunately is exactly as the United States, the United Nations say that the violence against women in the period, in the era of COVID-19 is a shadow pandemic. It's a growing pandemic back to back with the COVID-19 pandemic. And this is something that we can find also in Greece, of course, that we have from the Secretary General a lot of data about what's happening in Greece. We have almost, during the first quarantine, 4 times more calls, increasing the calls for special hotline, 15900, and several women call for the first time this specific period, and a third parties, friends, neighbors that hear that something happens close to them, they take this hotline. Because we have these increasing issues, we ask, and the hotline established an SMS services that, as you know, we cannot call when you have the partner near you, that he is the man that express the violence against you. So we have the opportunity to send an email in order to ask for help. And this is for all the period that is insist, and we have 3 until 4 times increasing of the violence against women. Mm-hmm. And I think that this is something that we need to stand up, all women, and this shadow pandemic, this invisible pandemic, have to focus on. And this is something that we have to face, and we need more policies in this field. We have a slogan because it was very crucial to have the TV spot, because unfortunately there was a lot of women that call us and say, what I can do, I don't know that there is a hotline or whatever, and we need to increase the awareness, dear Stella and the speakers and our audience, to have a spot in the TV, and we have a spot from the Secretary General about this issue, but it's a lot of more things to do.
And I would like to get back to these things in the second round of our questions. So thank you so much for painting this picture, this sad picture for us. I would like to go to Marta. Hello.
Hello.
And I would like to ask you, what about Norway? I mean, we have Norway in our minds as an example to follow. And what about there? What was the impact of the pandemic for women there?
Yes, you already touched upon the pandemic. It hits people in very different ways. It's a class question, of course, like every other question. So it hits the poor harder than the rich, and women harder than men. And in that picture, Norway is a rich country. We are not as hard, we haven't been hit as hard as very many other countries, because we have this welfare system. We have a great, we have achieved a lot of equality. we have very. Yeah, I listened to the woman from the US, and in Norway we do have a very high percentage of women in the workforce, and we have very, very few stay-at-home moms. We have kindergartens, which is funded by the government for every kids over the age of 1 year old. And we have paid paternal leave for 1 whole year before that. And also for the fathers for a few months there. So all of these things have made it easier for Norway, even though we of course haven't felt that this has been easy at all, but we always have to compare and see that this could have gone so much worse for us.
We do.
Yeah, but even though all we do have equal community, there have been reports that the pandemic have pulled gender equality in Norway in the wrong direction. Also, the traditional gender role pattern has been strengthened. Because when a large part of the society closed down, family life became more intensified, and there was so much more of the traditional housework when, like childcare, cooking, shopping for food, washing, and then so women reported also in Norway that they now did more of what they already did more of before. So it is, and also we had reports that violence at home had increased, and so it's the same problems, but in a smaller scale probably than in many other countries.
Thank you very much. I will get back to you because I want to end on a positive note later. But first, I want to go to Andigoni and ask you. We keep hearing about billions of dollars that Lieutenant Governor Kunalάκη said that were invested in trying to build this safety net. And then Marta also talked about a very strong welfare state. And I would like to ask you if you have any other good practices to share with us from this country or other countries that, as I said before, differentiate the societies that handle these issues more effectively than others.
This is a difficult question because the pandemic is still on and the accounts of the pandemic are still open. So we have to look at what we know and expect more to judge. Countries that appear to be very successful in the first wave, like Portugal, had a disastrous second wave, and then they became the world leaders in vaccination in the third. I mean, it's something that comes and goes, and it's not very fixed, what works, what doesn't. When we talk about resilience, we tend to attribute it to countries. Is a country resilient or not? Greece could be seen as a vulnerable country in the sense that the 10-year recession was not really over when the pandemic hit. So people were thinking that Greece would be more vulnerable to it. It appears that this is not strictly true. And this gives rise to a second thought that maybe one adversity sort of creates behaviors and responses that are useful for the next one, for the next crisis. When looking then at how women responded in the financial crisis, we saw that they stepped up their effort in the paid employment. And they also increased very significantly their share in the family budgets. This was made by necessity, of course, but we all work because of necessity. We don't do that because we like it. So in a sense, this is a situation that shows that there are windows of opportunities for resilient people to step in and make a difference. What I'm saying is not that adversity is the best how shall I say, usher to progress. But I'm saying that there are cracks in the system. And when thinking about resilience, we have to think about groups and families and individuals less than about countries. And I feel that there is, of course, a pessimist view that says that women entered the pandemic with fewer buffers. They had fewer savings, not very glamorous jobs. They didn't have property, so they will suffer more. But on the flip side, the pandemic was like it drew a curtain and made visible what was invisible so far. The inequalities, the everyday actors of our welfare, but also it showed, and this I think is the most positive thing I can offer in this discussion, it also showed that the impossible can be possible. That when need asks, we can reimagine our everyday reality in ways that were thought completely impossible in the past. And I think this is a hope we should hold on to, because it can show that the usual modern Greek reaction, oh, these things cannot happen in Greece, can be proven wrong.
But I liked what you say about women stepping up their game and their outside of the home employment, because it pairs with what Marta mentioned before about Norway. And maybe this is a reason why Norway was more resilient in this issue of the impact of the pandemic on women. So I will also hold on to that. Zέφη, if you are still, you're still here with us, great.
Yes,
so
I'm
I'm always anxious about the technical details.
Here, I'm with you.
So what about good practices from other countries, or bad practices from other countries for combating this gender-based violence uptake during the pandemic?
Just to highlight that the violence against women costs 226 billion euros each year, which represent 2% of the annual EU budget. That means that we can focus and highlight also the economic parameter that sometimes we cannot, touch it. So I think that the Istanbul Convention, it's a very good tool for all of us. So we need to work hard in the Istanbul Convention. We have established in Greece in 2018, and now we need to push more focus on this convention. So we have good practices, and I think we need to exchange our views, and this is a very good opportunity today to express these good opportunities and these good examples, because as I have a lot of time saying in the European level, we can exchange between us our knowledge, our experience, and we have to win-win situation of it. So in Belgium, I'd like to highlight that we have a very good initiative. In the COVID era, Belgium, we have established of the sexual assault care centers. This was a center that can offer a comprehensive psychological, forensic, and medical care for the victims of sexual violence. And this was something really important, because exactly you can go there in the center and have cooperation between hospital, doctors, police, and public prosecutor officer in one place. All victims can take this care at one place and at once. And I think this is something very important for the victims, that they cannot go on with all the procedure issues, all the bureaucracy issues that we have in many countries, and not only in Greece. So this is a very good point for us to take these good cases and go further. I think we have to stick on that and have these sexual assault care centers also in a supermarket, also close maybe in a supermarket, or close in a place that women, the victims, can easily go there, and not only the police. I think that this is a good example. We need to stick on that, and we can, of course, exchange our views different other good examples that if we have time, I can come again and promote some more examples for our discussion.
That's a great example. Thank you so much. And I wish we had more time to go deeper. And maybe this is a good idea, a great idea for our next workshop, that it needs to focus on good practices around gender-based violence. I promised I would end with on a high note. So I would like to ask Marta, who has written now 2 books on the feminist movements and the battle of women for equality. And I would like to ask you whether within these 18 months you have seen a positive impact on the way we deal with the issue of equality around the world.
Well, yeah, around the world, I don't know yet, because at the moment, I do believe that there are many downsides for if you look outside Europe. But if we talk about the European countries and the Western world, then there has been some of what you call to pull back the curtains. We have been aware of some things that we hadn't seen before. In Norway, there has been a big discussion around those kind of typical female, traditional female occupations, like in the healthcare system, and all of these women who has stood in the front and faced the danger and done it to keep us all safe. And in the start, there was people were applauding them and sending them roses in social media, but then they said, "Hey, we don't need applause. We need more money, and we need better working conditions." And they have now a very great support in the society. So that is one good thing, that we can keep on pushing that that wave. And also we have had big debate in Norway the last 1.5 years around something what we call the third shift. Like in the 70s, you started to talk about to work double shifts. Like the first, you go out and have your daily paid job, and then you went home and did all the jobs in the house. In Scandinavian countries, I don't know about if it's I think we are in front of in these cases, but this typical homework and taking care of the kids is very much more evenly distributed between the sexes today. But then now we started to talk about the third shift. Someone call it emotional work, and it's all these things that has to do with organizing a family, with it's in contrast to more specific housework such as laundry and cooking. It's not registered in service on equality, but it's all the time that women spend on planning.
Sometimes we call it the mental load.
Yeah. It is. It's like Maya needs new slippers in school, and what size is she wearing, and do we have enough sunscreen, and have we remembered that cake for Sunday, and it has to be gluten-free, and all the things, all the presents, all the celebrations, or all these things that isn't seen. It's just seen if it's not done, and if it's not done, it's the women who have the bad conscience about it. And this kind of low work, you can call it that, is very important, but we have to talk about it and lift it up so that we see what's being done, and that's happened in the debate in Norway. So I'm very positive about that.
That's so great, and I think this is a great bridge for our next panel, which is about feminism in the 21st century in Greece, which will be moderated by my co-founder, Penelope Theodorakoukou. I would like to thank you so much for being here with us. Zέφη, you too. I wish we will have you with us in our next conference from near, not afar. Thank you so much for being here with us today, and good luck with everything.
To Stella, Marta, and Andigoni.